Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Welcome to you, Josh.
Thank you.
And over here, I got Matt Van Milligan. Matthew, welcome to you.
Hello.
Freshly shaven.
Yes.
Yeah, freshly shaven and looking good, I guess.
Yeah.
Eh? Yeah, we still got some
Scruff
going on, some scruff going on. Listen, I want to talk to you guys today about something that, can be confusing for people, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's public revelation, okay? Like, so we have scripture, we have tradition, those sort of things. Then there's private revelation, like things that come through prayer or through people's own experience of God, right? Mm-hmm. And, you always have in the parish, as a priest in the parish, you always have people come up and say like, well, how come we don't do this devotion? Or how come we don't, print copies of this brochure that talks about, this shrine or this miracle or whatever it is. And, the church is so large, the church is so big that, you have a lot of people who come to you with different things. And for me, it's like, okay, well, the mass majority of people obviously are familiar with the scriptures and the tradition of the church, maybe, yeah. But there's a bunch of private revelations that come. Like, what weight does it bear? Like, do we have to believe in all these things, or does it have to be part of our practice of faith? Does the parish have to put on these different devotions and promote these different miracles or whatever it might be? So I thought we would talk a little bit about that today, because there has been some private revelation that's been really popular, right? Like Fatima. For example, Fatima, Mary appeared to the three children, became a Netflix movie. Well, I think it was a movie. Now it's on Netflix, I think. It wasn't a Netflix movie. But there's popularity there.
For sure.
Right? And people are like so excited about Fatima, which, that's fantastic. And maybe they should be. Yeah?
Our Lady Guadalupe. Another one. Yeah, perfect.
Right.
Perfect example.
Then there's like controversial ones, right? Like, I don't know if maybe some people have heard of Medjugorje. Yeah. Right? Like that has some controversy behind it.
Attached.
So I thought, between, Matt's wisdom and Josh's experience,
we can dive into this a little bit.
We can get into this topic a little bit. Right?
Yeah, sure. So, there are... I think a lot of you would say, maybe not necessarily the controversy, but a lot of the confusion is that like you hear about these things in a context where you're not actually sure, what the faithful are required to accept.
Right.
Even in our one of our recent RCIA sessions, one of our candidates asked, we were talking about sacred scripture and how it is kind of the definitive revelation. And they were saying, could there be, another testament? We were talking about the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Like, could there be a new book of the Bible?
Testament.
A third testament. And that's a really interesting question. Yeah. And we go to the Catechism and we say there are no additional sources of definitive revelation. So the Word become flesh in Christ, and sacred Scripture are our definitive sources of revelation. So that is complete in its own right. But how do we reconcile that to the fact that there have been private revelations since, and many of these that the Church has recognized or endorsed. How do you sift between kind of, what we're required to accept, what we have the option of, having a private devotion to, and, other situations where, the Church has disapproved these revelations and we're actually required to reject those.
So, yeah, I like what he would say, because there can be no new public revelations in a sense, but the Church can... How do you say that? Like, deepen its understanding.
Strive to understand deeper. Yeah.
The existing public revelation.
Our Lady of Lourdes, or Saint Bernadette, would be a perfect example of that. In the private revelation of Immaculate Conception, the Church was battling this thing going on and trying to understand deeper the Immaculate Conception. What is the Immaculate Conception? And while the bishops and the cardinals and Rome, or I don't know if it was Rome, but the authorities of the Church at the time were battling this in some far-off country. This little shepherd girl, this little girl, has a vision of this woman who says, "I am the Immaculate Conception," and the Church then starts to how does she know these words?
Yeah.
How does she understand this title and that stuff that's being battled in the country, like way far away. And then all of a sudden, again, the lady, the apparition, the appearance of Our Lady, then instructs the girl to dig, and a fountain springs forth, and people are being healed by this fountain. And like, so it was God's way of revealing through private revelation, but that this is a direction that he may, like the church had a deeper understanding than what exactly they were battling over what the Immaculate Conception was. Mm-hmm. We already had the idea. We already kind of knew, but we were trying to battle what were the parameters, if you will, to put the Immaculate Conception in. And it was through this private revelation that the church kind of got some understanding, deeper understanding maybe of the faith, or deeper understanding of what to teach there. Mm-hmm. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
it just didn't come out of the blue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, and there's a process associated with it. It's like when we were talking about Eucharistic miracles. Mm-hmm. It's not as though somebody claims to have had this experience or claims to have witnessed this thing, and the church just green lights it, gives it a check mark, and says, "Okay, this is way to go." But there's actually a discernment process. So one of the things, at Divine Mercy especially, is that one of the criteria, one of the things they look at is what is the fruit of this revelation, and especially when there's like something like the Immaculate Conception, like does this contradict what the church teaches as revelation? Like, does this correlate to the deposit of faith? And that all of these things working together help to establish its validity, and this is part of the process that the church goes through in actually verifying these,
what is that called again? That was the what was that called? All the steps that they go through.
Yeah. So, in, I believe, 1978, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith established specific norms for the discernment of apparitions and private revelations. Yeah. But again, in this case, it's affirming a process that the church has gone through
already
for hundreds of years.
Good stuff.
And can I maybe just break this down a little bit? Because private revelation, right? I see it as like both if I can break down private revelation into a personal private revelation, and maybe I don't want to say public because that would confuse it with the public revelation, right? But you know what I mean, like sort of a larger scale revelation that's still private, because each one of us in our prayer, when we encounter Jesus, have some sort of private revelation. Yeah. And the goal, or maybe the fruit, I should say, of that individual private revelation is that our faith is deepened, and we become more Christ-like. We become disciples. We tell people about like how when we encountered God, or how we feel called by God to do this or that, or whatever it might be, right? In the same way, like private revelation that is on a larger scale, not so much as an individual, is to do the same, right? Yeah. Like a private revelation, like let's say when Mary appears, it's to draw it draws people and those who hear about it and those who know about it into a deeper faith. Yeah. Like that's the purpose of it, right?
For sure.
Okay, so those are sort of two, things to break down from private revelation. Yeah. Now, the thing that bothers me a little bit, and you can't help it, so I'm not criticizing it, but like you look at these places with large private revelations, like let's say Fatima or Lourdes or whatever. Exactly. They turn into these markets. Yeah. They turn into these big
selling point
for tourists. Yep. And when you go there, it's like, whoa, it's become something that's,
commercialized.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm not criticizing it, because of course there's a need for that. People want to go to Lourdes and buy a statue of Mary. People want to go to, or take water home, right? People want to go to Fatima and do the same thing. Yeah. So of course there's a market for that, and I'm sure, I don't know, maybe the money goes to help sisters or charities. I don't know.
Well, I think that's where things break down. It would be like if it was that this was going towards helping the donation of building St. Joseph's Oratory, or those types of things, right, then that's a different kind of story. But what happens is humanity strikes, and so whereas people want to buy a rosary, commercially you're filling a need by giving them a rosary from Lourdes or from Our Lady Fatima.
Yes.
But at the same time, now how do I market this? How do I sell this? If I can get three, like, it becomes more a marketing game. How do you get more out there? And I mean, your purpose could be all good, but it is a commercial game, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Right.
And so it becomes more about the selling. And what happens is when businesses step in and marketing steps in and faith takes a backseat to that commercialization, that's when it becomes a problem. But I think in the hints of Fatima and Lourdes, revelation happened. And then it became commercialized.
Yes.
Of
Does
course.
that make sense?
Of course.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm not criticizing it, because it's just it's sort of it's what happens. It's sort of,
I think from a non-Catholic point of view, or let's say an atheist
that
point
was
of view.
my point.
Yeah.
From looking from the outside, it's like,
in.
wow, no kidding. They said Mary appeared right here. Look what it's
Of course, the
their
church is
economy.
supporting. Look at this.
Right,
Like they're making all this money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But on the other side, like, I'd fall right into it. Like, I'm not going all the way to Lourdes and not buying
A souvenir.
I'm not going to Fatima, and not buying anything. Like, I'd participate right in it.
Yeah, I think what you said is the kind of material point that, of course, and anyone who's experienced these, that these have become approved apparitions, and because of that, they've become pilgrimage sites for the faithful.
Right.
And there's a human element where the souvenir market sees an opportunity here, or even giving the benefit of the doubt that some of these might be ministries, and that the profits generated may go back into. But again, this becomes really complicated when one of these sites becomes a commercial enterprise before it's approved. Because coming back to the 1978 norms, is that one of it lays out positive and negative criteria. So one of the positive criteria is that as a pilgrimage site, it's generating a lot of positive spiritual fruit. That there's good outcomes in terms of vocations, in terms of renewal of the spiritual life. One of the negative criteria is this kind of profiteering mentality, that there can be the perception that commercial interests or market interests are driving kind of the
revelation.
The need for approval of the site. So of the examples that you gave, something like Lourdes and Fatima were established and approved pilgrimage sites before this kind of market.
So what would
infiltrated?
Even the idea of Fatima, like there's thousands of people that saw the miracle of the sun. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but thousands of people seeing this miracle happen before them. Yeah. But it wasn't a commercial thing. It wasn't like they're selling tickets to it, right?
No,
anybody showed up and saw it.
Yeah,
and
like when you see images of people that gathering at the end. It wasn't people being like, "Come on, get your rosaries."
You can only see the miracle of the sun if you pay me $10.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, but what my question is, so we're talking about things that are approved and then have become like tourist attractions. What is an example of something that's maybe not been approved and is becoming an attraction, or is an attraction?
I think Medjugorje is a perfect example of that, and that's where kind of there's controversy around Medjugorje for a couple of reasons. So if you don't know the story of Medjugorje, basically 10 students altogether, 10 visionaries,
seers as
they're called them. Okay, 10 children were stepping outside to try to steal smoke. Okay, and they totally admit it. I mean, these visionaries are still alive, but they were stepping outside.
The year is 1981.
1981.
Yes.
They step outside. They see Our Lady appeared before them. She doesn't say anything. They don't communicate. They see it, and apparently all 10 see Our Lady. And so what they do is they until it stops, they watch, and then they leave the site and they talk about it amongst themselves, and then they come back the next day, and Our Lady's there again. And then eventually, what happens is she starts speaking to them, and as the stories go around Medjugorje, that she started talking to them 40 years ago, and has talked to them every single day since then. And sometimes she has private words for them, their own personal. Sometimes she has words to the world. Sometimes it's just to the area. She told the Medjugorje area that she would like them to stop selling tobacco, which is their main source of industry, and they switched over that year until grapes and sell wine.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a big one.
I didn't know that.
So things like that kind of
that's
happen.
the reason they discovered Mary. They were smoking tobacco.
There's a little bit of wacky tobacco going on. No, but for sure, I think so in that area. So the church then has to step up and take when you start seeing Jesus on toast, for instance, to kind of give that example, Jesus on toast, the church steps in and has to make an authoritative declaration. Okay, this is just a weird piece of burnt toast.
Right, it's marble toast.
It's marble toast. Exactly. It's not what you're seeing is a cloud formation in the sky type thing, not necessarily a revelation. But for this one in particular, it's very difficult, I think, for the church to make an official a stance. And part of the reason is because the bishop there at the beginning kind of had flip-flopped a little bit. He first said, okay, it's okay to practice. And then he said, no, it's not okay. And then the Vatican backed him up. And so then the church at one time was declaring that this wasn't authentic. And then they said, well, it's not authentic until we can get more studies into it. And so then they looked further into it, and they kind of went back and forth a little bit. But I think one of the biggest problems that happened was it was declared to be a miracle, even though the bishop had said no. It was declared, and some of the local area started declaring it to be this miracle and these visions, and that stuff was happening, and Mary was speaking on a very specific basis. And so people ignored the church's authority on the matter. And like, basically, you don't get a say in this. We're doing this anyways.
Okay, I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
Like, Mary appears.
Yeah.
Right? Someone sees Mary. Let's say Mary appeared to us when we walk out of the studio today. Why does the church have to affirm it? Like, why you know what I mean? Like, why does the church have to affirm it? Why does someone say, well, take that to the Catholic Church then?
Yeah. The answer is technically that they don't. So that, if an individual has a private revelation, that is just for them. Like the same way you were saying that, we can have revelations in prayer,
right,
that are for us.
Yeah, we don't take revelations all of them to the Pope.
So, but if someone is making a claim that a revelation has public implications, that a revelation is for the church, then again, according to the 1978 norms, that the local ecclesiastical authority has an obligation to investigate those claims, because they're making a claim that this is for the whole church, that this isn't personal, this is public,
for all Catholics, or for all people.
So there's an onus on the church itself to make some sort of declaration about whether or not this is valid, because the implications are that people should or should not accept.
So essentially, then at Medjugorje, which is in Bosnia-Herzegovina, right? These people took the vision of Mary. Yeah. They came and shared with it. They came and shared it with people. They kind of brought more people to the site, right? Mm-hmm. So in this sense, it's now affecting the larger public, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just a private revelation for their individual lives. And so the bishop gets involved.
They're also claiming that Mary has a message for the world. And so when they have private and they claim both. They claim that some of these words are just for us.
Right.
One of the things with Medjugorje is that they claim that there's 10 secrets that Our Lady revealed to all the visionaries. Some of them have received all 10. I think a couple of them are waiting on the 10th secret. And once all the 10 secrets are revealed to all the visionaries, then those things are going to start happening. And so they're allowed to reveal to us at that time. But I mean, there's a bunch of, so here's the problem that I have. And it is the problem that I have with, there's the authority of the church. And when God granted the authority of the church here on earth, and what you bind on earth is bound in what is it, right. And he gave the church that authority to say. So when Mary was appearing, if the local bishop was to put a lid on it, if you look back at all the faithful saints, Saint Therese, Padre Pio, all those, they listened to the authority of the church. Mm-hmm. It didn't mean that the miracles stopped happening, but like Padre Pio did not celebrate publicly.
Yeah, there's something to say about obedience.
Exactly. And so he was doing that. What happened in Medjugorje was it kind of became ignore the bishop, listen to us. We got the direct source here. We were talking directly to Mary. Now, it wasn't necessarily from the visionaries themselves. It was other people around it. So it became commercialized. And so the problem that the church has is they can't declare. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't declare this to be authentic while it's still going on, because the visionaries could maybe go off the path and say something that's completely contrary to what the Catholic Church teaches.
Because they're still receiving messages to this day. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. They're still receiving. Now, some of them are only receiving it on their birthdays. Some of them are only receiving it. Some of them are still receiving daily messages. And so it's kind of at this point. This is 40 years later. So they're in their 50s and 60s. These visionaries, and so it's still happening. And so the church can't make a declaration that this is authentic or not, but they can't say. There's so much going on there, and people are coming and worshiping, and there is fruits coming from this place of worship.
Yeah,
there's a lot of conversions happening.
That was my next question. It's like, okay, so even that there's a bit of controversy there, because like you said, I think the bishop sort of was like, yes, these visions are okay, and then no, we don't think that they're legit or whatever. But so there's controversy wrapped in the whole thing, and then at one time the Vatican had said something about sort of adding to the confusion, like Matt says. I should use confusion instead of controversy, right?
Yeah, confusion. Yeah.
But now there are people who flock to Medjugorje for this shrine, for this holy place, and leave changed.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I have a good friend of mine who really loved his experience there. I think he went there a number of times, started a peace movement, because of it. Like, people are changed. So God is sort of working here, right? So I don't think that's the confusion. The confusion is and I believe, if I'm correct, Pope Francis, his position on the matter was, because I believe that Pope Benedict he sent an envoy to what was happening was you had the bishop saying one thing, and then the Catholic community around Medjugorje saying a completely other thing. And so the Vatican now is stepping in to try to put things right. And so they were looking at all the words that were said over 40 years. Yes. Every single day. Like, that's a lot of stuff to go through. And having to look at every single, like Fatima, what was 3 visions? Or 4 visions? I can't remember exactly. There was a couple visions, but the words that Our Lady said was only those 3. So the church can look at that and go, okay, we got these 3 things or 4 things or 5 things to analyze that Our Lady said. And is this true? It goes with the Catholic Church. There's nothing against the Catholic Church or not the Catholic Church, nothing against the teachings that we know, like to make it authenticated. Well, they have 40 years of content to go through that 10 people are receiving every single day. Right. So, up until a point, that's a lot of material. So Pope Benedict starts the investigation. Pope Francis inherits it because of the transition in the papacy in 2013. And I believe Pope Francis's position on it was that because there are still people being sort of moved by God, they're encountering God, that can sort of continue, right? And people can still, like, it's like, because there was an understanding at a time, if I'm not mistaken, a number of years ago, like the Vatican was, or some of the bishops were saying, like, it's not okay for Catholics to go to Medjugorje, because the bishop had said no, this is not the local bishop area said this is not, and they weren't obeying, right? And so because of that, if you're listening to through the authority of the church, then it should have stopped. And that's where it kind of gets really sketchy. Yes.
Yeah. At this point, it would be very difficult for the church to make a definitive pronouncement on the validity of Medjugorje, because effectively, if it's a definitive rejection, it would say hurting the people that, and you're saying that, like, the experiences that people have really been kind of a byproduct of 40 years of fraud. Yeah. But on the positive end, that a blanket endorsement of Medjugorje as putting it on the level of kind of public veneration of something Fatima, like Lourdes or Fatima or something like that, kind of disregards some of the irregularities, like the disobedience to ecclesiastical authorities, the secrets. That there's when you're talking about public veneration, public revelation, that this, according to De Verbum, dogmatic constitution on
the Word of God,
and the Catechism, Article 66 and 67, that if revelation is complete, individuals possessing secret knowledge about, or insights about revelation, like, this looks like Gnosticism. This looks like a lot of the practices that a lot of the early church fathers condemned. And even in Fatima, there are secrets associated with Fatima, but these are for the Pope. These are for the church. These are for the kind of magisterial governance of the church. So some of the irregularities of Medjugorje are kind of nuanced and complicated, that, a blanket endorsement or even an outright rejection would be very difficult for the church to maintain. So in response, like the envoy that was kind of renewed in, I think, 2017, they're taking a more nuanced response. So they're saying that, it's possible and even likely that kind of the initial revelations,
Yes.
were supernatural in nature.
Exactly.
Are approved, but again, given the complication of the commercial aspect or the continued revelation, there isn't enough information to verify, and that's further complicated by the fact that the local ecclesiastical authority, that they've had differing positions on this over time as well.
And if you look at Fatima with the secrets, because I know there's Fatima secrets, there's Medjugorje secrets. Fatima, when the children were asked what the secrets were, they wrote them down and they gave them to the priest.
Mm-hmm.
Like they
were
divulged, they were obedient to the authorities of the church. You know what I mean? Even Our Lady said, we can't share these secrets. And the priest ordered them to. And then they were obedient. They gave those secrets over. And so the church knows what those secrets were. And the church didn't share them necessarily until, at certain times. But for Medjugorje, like there's these, again, just some ideas. No, I agree. I think I love when you look back at what the church has said now and saying, we believe that this started authentically. Like this was Mary, but then we can't say what happened after because there are some irregularities there that we don't know how to reconcile yet. Now, maybe they'll come in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Maybe we'll be able to reconcile these and we'll figure out how to. But at this moment, we can't declare, as you said, we're not going to declare it false. Yeah. Because that means every person's experience that they have, and I've heard from people who have gone, it's like it's a boost to your Catholic faith on steroids almost. You know what I mean? Like you go and you're just like, there's confession everywhere, and there's this, that, and the other, and people are having conversions. At the same time, like God is going to, if your heart is open, if you're going to Medjugorje for a conversion, He's going to talk to you. I mean, like your heart is open for that. He's going to use that. And so, not saying again that it's false or real. Like it just that it's a private thing. If you're open to it and it takes you going on a pilgrimage. Yeah.
And we wouldn't want to invalidate someone's legitimate spiritual experience.
100% not. No.
And it would be enormously presumptuous of us to claim to have, the knowledge or the insight or
when the church is still
committing the
with
same sort of Gnostic fallacy.
Now, what you just said about invalidate someone's spiritual experience. Yeah. Again, we're keeping the framework that it's not surpassing something that the church teaches, right?
That's right.
Someone who says, I had a spiritual moment that, a tree spoke to me and said it was Jesus or something like that. That's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about. No.
Okay, so just to wrap up here, I have a final sort of thing. Now, what if someone says, I don't believe that Mary appeared at Fatima, or I don't believe that the visions, or whatever it might be, for me, that's not for me. Like, I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm a church attending Catholic. I love the Lord. I'm living my life as a disciple, but I'm not really sold on the idea that Mary appeared at Lourdes or wherever.
We talked about dogma, doctrine before.
Yes. Yeah.
Private revelation would fall under discipline, I believe, right? Would fall under that category.
Yes. Yeah. And that's completely fine because, the catechism specifies that private revelations, even public venerations, are not considered part of the deposit of faith. Therefore, the faithful are not obliged to accept them, to believe them, but it is even in the case of approved apparitions and approved revelation. But in the case where the church does offer kind of a definitive repudiation of someone claiming to see Mary in their marble rye,
right?
Or like then the faithful are obliged to reject that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it goes back to, like, you keep mentioning the Catechism 66 and 67, right? Mm-hmm. Like the teaching there says that because throughout the ages there have been private revelations, some of which have been recognized by the authority of the church, they do not belong, however, to the deposit of faith.
Yes.
Which means it's not their role to prove for us about Jesus or whatever it might be. Like, so we're not we're not required to assent to them.
Especially if they're authenticated by the church, they're there to enhance your faith.
Yeah.
But they're required for your faith.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And I think something like the Fatima story. I love like just when you hear that, like
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just so.
And dive into it. I mean, that's the authenticated visions of the church that the church has said yes to. They've done their work, so that's why they have no problem stepping up and saying, like, there's no problem with Fatima. There's no problem with Lourdes.
Right.
They've done their investigation. They've checked it all out. There's no way St. Bernadette could possibly have known about I Am the Immaculate Conception going on in Rome. Like, they've done their homework on this, so they have no problem saying, yeah, no, this is authentic. And they won't declare, we're not saying Medjugorje is one way or another. They won't declare, I can tell you right now, they won't declare Medjugorje to be authentic until it is finalized.
Over.
Yeah, until it's over, until the visionaries have probably deceased, I'm going to imagine, only because then Mary's no longer appearing to them. That kind of thing. They cannot, because if one of them was to come out and say something completely contrary, it would, so they won't. The church will wait until the entire season's over.
All right. Well, I hope that, you and Matt and myself, we continue to have individual private revelations, like encounters with God, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if anyone out there has maybe a story about a real encounter with Jesus, or maybe an encounter with Mary, send it to us. That'd be really cool to hear. So send it to us. Or if you have any questions about what we talked about today, you can send it. We'll send out a clarification, or any ideas for a future episode to askus@thecatholicbuzz.com, or you can visit our website at thecatholicbuzz.com, or leave a comment right on our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And you know what? You can tell your friends and family about the Catholic Buzz podcast as well. My name is Father Daniele, for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan. Thanks for tuning in to the Catholic Buzz.